Welcome to the Source of Commercial Real Estate, where we discuss all things non-residential commercial real estate, including finding and funding deals, market intel, finding a competitive advantage, and using real estate to live the life that you want. I am your host, Jonathan Hayek, and today I am talking with Anthony Dilweg, and his company is simply called Dilweg. Anthony founded the firm in 1999 and is a partner in various firm-owned real estate partnerships. He oversees acquisition, enhancement, and disposition strategies for all firm-owned assets through his guidance of the investment committee and steers the strategic direction of the firm as a member of the leadership committee. Anthony graduated from Duke University in 1989 and spent interesting 3 years as a quarterback in the NFL before entering the commercial real estate business as a broker in 1993. Anthony, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Jonathan. Pleasure being on your show.
Fantastic. Well, let's get right into it. Anthony, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background, besides playing in the NFL for 3 years, how you got started in real estate, and what your work looks like today?
Sure. Born and raised in just outside Washington, D.C., grew up with three sisters. Had father worked at Xerox and Honeywell with the doing computer integration systems with the Pentagon, and mostly in sales. And my mother was home, raising four of us. So grew up, went to Walt Whitman High School, and then earned a scholarship to play quarterback at Duke University. So was there in the mid 80s, played for a great coach, Steve Spurrier, which I attribute a lot of my business acumen and experience from his coaching style. And then got a chance to play in the NFL for 3 years, as you mentioned. And then post NFL, it's always tricky for any professional athlete transitioning into kind of what's next. So I looked at different areas. I had a chance to work in the Board of Trade in Chicago as a summer job, and I was at Duke. Did a swimsuit calendar, doing some entrepreneur stuff when I was at Duke. The Women of the Triangle had UNC, NC State, and Duke. So my mother wasn't too pleased with that, but we had fun doing it. And then also really was intrigued by real estate. And so looked around quite a bit, and I felt like the Southeast, with the growth, the demographics, the trends, where it was heading, was super intrigued by the opportunity, and then came back in Raleigh-Durham in 1993, and got into brokerage because I figured if you're going to learn the space, why not roll up your sleeves and get into it and learn it from some really smart, savvy, experienced and knowledgeable folks and just pick their brains. So I did brokerage for 3 years and then picked up some rental property on the side. I had 20 units, about 8 duplexes, self-managed. I always like to tell the story, three years after playing with the Packers at Lambeau Field, I'm out cutting lawns at a duplex for 3 hours in northern Durham. So it's a very humbling experience, but a very valuable experience. So learn by self-managing these 20 single family and duplexes, and then eventually wanted to really learn the investment side that way, fixed them up, and then did some flipping, and then transitioned into the commercial side and started my company in 1999, primarily value add, opportunistic, space, very agnostic towards sector. And then started out in Raleigh Durham on that front, and then jumped into a lot of different sectors, then grew it from there.
So tell me, Anthony, what does Dilweg's portfolio look like today, and what's the trajectory of Dilweg?
So it's interesting, we've been primarily in the office sector, which anybody who is in real estate knows what's happening to office. So we were up to about 6 million square feet. We're currently about 4.5 million square feet. We're pretty explicit about where we feel office is going. There's about 4 billion square feet of office in the United States. Structurally, huge disruption in our space. If people are being honest and frank in the office space, they don't really know where the demand side, how it's going to play out. But one slice of the office that we actually really pursued hard before COVID was a single story creative type product, taking buildings. It's not necessarily the old warehouses. A lot of those played out the last 20, 25 years, but taking single story product, painting them, put accent wood on them, landscaping them really well, then, put really, kind of eye popping wayfinder signs, maybe do some hub space outside, drop a brewery in, so make it more experiential. And then, it actually did well during better than our traditional kind of mid-rise product during COVID because it was direct access to the spaces. You didn't have to go through lobbies and elevators and restrooms. So that picked up on that. So we like that space. We have about 2 million square feet, location in Texas and two in Georgia, then one up here in North Carolina, down in Charlotte. And we really want to grow that. We think that's going to outperform the market. And then we've got some urban property. We are not afraid and shied away. We try to work with lenders on restructuring on debt with our investors, but if it doesn't make sense, we've given the keys back on some properties. Shedding, pruning is important. So we kind of had our winners and our losers and our bubble properties, and it's shifting around almost every day, it seems like. And then working with lenders along those lines and our investors. So we're in Raleigh, Durham, Charlotte, down in Atlanta, down in Tampa, and then also in Dallas. But as I mentioned, we'd love to expand that single story creative office product. And we'll continue to shed product that doesn't make sense. Because of the $4 billion, I think the guys in our space recognize it pretty intimately. You're going to have probably some amount, maybe it's over $1 billion, that's basically obsolete. You're probably scraping the property ultimately. Behaviors are changing, tenant demands are changing, what they want to experience is changing. You'll have properties in the middle. Then you have some outperforming brand new product and great locations should do well, highly amenitized. We think the single story product is kind of a tier below it should do well. But that's kind of there's complexity in that. There's a lot of moving parts. I think it's going to take years to flush out. Castle, one of the security company, does utilization rates in office buildings. Look at the Tennessee, and it dropped off. If you ask their methodology, it's interesting. I question some areas but it really dropped off after COVID down to about 15%, and jumped about 40% in 18 months, and then went another 10% to about 50%. In the buildings they have, and I guess they have 4 or 5,000 buildings throughout the U.S. They all the cards they swipe. The only thing of their methodology is a little, sketchy is they swipe once and they count you in the building. But anyway, it's basically flatlined the last 8 months around 50%. And we're looking at Pacer AI, some cell phone data to really track folks in buildings, tenants in buildings a little bit more scientifically. I'm not saying they don't do it scientifically their own way, but we think there's probably better ways to really drill down there. So anyway, to get some elevation, 4.5 million square feet, all different, mostly mid-rise, and the rest are probably some urban product. And then I'll pause there. We have some interesting places I think we're going to go with it.
Cool. There's a ton that I want to go into. I had that single story creative office space. I want to get to that in a couple minutes. I want to stay at this kind of 30,000 foot view here. Tell me kind of in your portfolio and what you're observing in the markets that you're at, broad picture, what sort of office space is doing well and what sort of office space is really struggling?
So at least the data points and the markers today, you've got to captivate. You got to have something compelling enough to get the tenants back in properties. So big discussion about human and physical amenities, almost taking what we view, and at some point we'll get into some other verticals we're involved in, hospitality and a golf course we bought, but we see this collision between office and hospitality. It's not unique to us. We've been watching it. So these highly amenitized buildings have a lot to offer, in areas that high walk scores. So there's enough activity around it. Access is important. Obviously, safety is really important. These cities are going to have a tough grind coming back, some of them with some of their safety issues and crime. And so there's all this got thrown since COVID, thrown out of whack. But so, you're looking at different, the traditional conference rooms, a little cafe and maybe a weight room or a fitness center. That's great, but now it's all on steroids. So whatever imagination you want to throw out there, go for it, because it's anything to attract, the tenants, the back to really make it, like I said earlier, just something that really motivates and make it compelling. Now, here's my philosophy a bit on that. I think it's great. I think it's important. People want to have fun. They want to enjoy out the work. But the challenge I think we've run into is we've created this kind of expectation to make it so like engaging, exciting, entertaining, whatever you call it. At the end of the day, companies need to get their cultures right. They got to get people that are excited because they're a fear of missing out. So that comes back to the leadership and the people. We've done a poor job historically. Engagement factor has always been low. Actually, Harvard Business Review came out an article probably 2 years ago, which I really liked. They had a measurement about passion. They talk about passion. They said it's one of the most oversold things to the millennials, the Z's, anybody. Sure, we all want to love what we do, right? But there's a grind factor, and the grind factor, is serving others. That's just part of it. It's all about you. I think we've created this kind of it's all about you, which is unfortunate. So I think what you're seeing now is, well, back to this Harvard Business Review article, what they're saying about 20%. If you could, the holy grail is about 20%. If you can tap into somebody's passion, they love what they do, they can kind of grind out the rest. If it falls below that, they'll start disengaging. If it goes above it, it becomes very self-serving to them. They want more and more and more. It's never enough. So that's human nature a bit. So if you study human nature, all those areas, those variables seem to come into play. And I get it, it's all nuance, a lot of different moving parts in there. But I think that's, a combination of having something that's fun, entertaining, engaging, but also the companies, corporations have to get their cultures right. People want to know where they stand. They want to serve. They want to do something bigger. They want to grow. They want to be challenged. This is not all about nice. They want to be, they want to really be able to spread their wings, and they want leadership and mentorship and coaching. So all that comes together. You're not going to get it much sitting, zooming from home or hanging at home. Now I get it. Though people be living, working from home, that's okay. We'll be at a hybrid at the end of the day. So I see that those buildings over here that have that, and certainly the companies have a lot to do it. Then you have buildings on the other side. You're going to struggle mightily. They have access is okay, no real amenities around it. It's your standard office building. It was built, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, 2-story mid-rise, suburban, not much there, just no mojo. And unless they pump a lot of money or repurpose it, because we have a repurposing strategy, but that, or scrape it, I don't give a lot of hope for those assets today. Now, I get things could change. I don't see a big swing back to the office. I think we're going to find, like I said, this hybrid middle ground, which ties into another strategy we're looking at on the hospitality side. So it's really interesting right now. I think the reality is the people in our space and the people getting some elevation, thinking about real estate space, and the interest rates, are part of it. And I'm sure we'll go into that a little bit. It's just going to be some major disruptive changes, which, if you're opportunistic and a value add guy, you're pretty excited about. Now, over here, licking your chops. Over here, you're licking your chops and you're feeling blood in your mouth because you get the crap beaten out of you. We're operators, so we're on the front lines. So we're learning a lot over here to build a bridge to get to the other side. So that all comes together, and it's going to take years to play out. But we're all pretty excited about what we think it's going to happen. But in the meantime, we got to fight some battles.
So you brought up some really interesting points about the idea of company culture and the sort of the myth of people following their passion. You mentioned that Harvard Business Review. There's been a lot of research and a lot of just kind of talks about kind of the myth of this idea of young people following their passion. There might be a time in your life where that's appropriate, but maybe not a strategy for a lifetime. But then on the other hand, you've got the amenities in your buildings. You've got, you could put up I heard you at one point talk about putting up a rock climbing wall, and you could have a brewery on the roof deck, and you could have, tricked out fitness centers and all this stuff. So on the one hand, there's stuff that you can control. You can amenitize your buildings to the heels. But on the other hand, there's the company culture. And that's the culture of your tenants, which you ultimately don't control. So talk to me about as you're looking to fill vacant space, as you're looking to re-sign tenants, how are you balancing the certain tenant? Are you or are operators looking for warm bodies to fill spaces? Or are you really being thoughtful about, what, this company has a great culture. I think they're going to make it. This company, they want to lease it, but I don't know. I don't feel good about them long term. Are you being thoughtful about that? Or is it really just a matter of getting a warm body willing to pay rent in there?
Yeah, it's an important question. So certainly warm bodies that have credit and can pay some rent are pretty darn good, right? So interesting, back to your comment about culture. You're right. We don't control culture, right? So and that's not a criteria to go in our buildings, but that's just an observation that I look forward to. Hopefully, U.S. Companies start really, I think that's the reality. It's coming, and that's something that maybe the pandemic has helped foster and increase. The other side is, yeah, you are scrutinizing tenants. You are looking at their stickiness. You're looking at their credit. You're looking at the sector they're in. Because the debate in office right now, are you putting good money after bad on any deal you do going forward? Does it really make sense? And you and I could sit here and start looking at, we traditionally use a model called Argus, to get your NOI, whether it's Excel, all the worksheets you look at, and you're like, okay, well, we can start looking at the cost. And guess what? Transaction cost has gone up. All the arrows are going the wrong direction. And the last arrow that's turning over right now in office, which is not great, is you're going to start seeing rents, top line, asking rent's going to most likely start falling. Your net rents were already falling, but because we were getting away with pushing higher rents, I think you're going to see that fall too, because vacancies just overwhelm the market right now. So, thinking through some of those moving parts, it does make it tricky as you navigate and work with tenants, to find the right ones that make sense. But, we're pretty aggressive and we go after ones we want to hopefully be there. But when you do these models and you start doing some sensitivity around the exit, and Jonathan, you know this, right? You start going, all right, well, let's use, is Powell going to stick to his gun? Maybe he pushes rates more, which I'm actually for. I think we got to normalize. We've been on crack interest rates for long. There's a long time. There's a heck of a lot of net worth in this country. But anyway, that's part of another thread of the discussion. But if you start doing sensitivity around this stuff, you're like, all right, well, let's use an 8 cap or a 9 cap, 10 cap. Well, if you use a 10 cap, you're likely underwater. If you use 11 cap, you're way underwater. A 9 cap may break even, and an 8 cap is like, wow, we're starting to make money. Or 7 cap, we're starting to make money. You're like, well, I don't know if it's going to go to 7 cap. Yep. That's the problem. And lenders and investors right now, the prudent, savvy, experienced lenders and investors in office are going, it's so capital intensive, I mean, I love the office building you did, because you sat there and said, I'm going to do an accent wall. It's like a co-working space. You had 5,000 square feet. You had these smaller offices. You painted carpet. You didn't go pump a ton of money probably in it, but you did enough where you got people excited. And you flipped it and made some money. Well done. So this thing, office traditionally is just so capital intensive that you have people just terrified to put too much money in. So you're kind of in this no man's land. It's pretty interesting. And with rates being higher and retention's a big part of it. So recruiting tenants is really, really important. But you keep asking yourself, does it make sense to really go put dollars in? Now, our single story creative office, we're pushing there. Our mid-rise stuff is really tough. Most of the stuff, and we have another probably 4 or 5 properties. We're going to probably ultimately end up giving back to the lender. Plus, I have to negotiate personal guarantee, so I'm battling that side to it. So you got all this is now. Good news is I'm not the only one on the table on the office side that's doing all this stuff with lenders. And the OCC and the FDIC and the Fed came out on June 29th with guidance for lenders, primarily community banks and regional and national banks, on how to work with borrowers. It's just like it's basically the stuff we went through in 07, 09, but they're going to crank it up. They're going to have to do that to get through this. A lot of extend and pretend, sometimes that's good, but you just got to be careful. You're not just putting, any kind of good money after bad.
Man, I mean, as you talk, I can write down about 6 different questions as you're answering this. So, in the spirit of keeping this to under 4 hours today, I'm going to stick to my outline for the most part. But yeah, the office sector is just so interesting. I don't know where you got that information on my office building, but it was accurate. Yeah, I mean, I'm a value add guy. And so I think about, gosh, is there opportunity in the office space? But for me at the level that I'm at, there's just too much risk for me right now. We don't know where rents are going, and with the amount of potential capital expenses and TI that potential tenants might ask for, it's just probably out of my wheelhouse at the moment. So I want to ask you about the asset class that I haven't heard anyone else talk about. This asset class, you call it single story creative office space. It makes me think of co-working space a little bit, but I want to go deeper into it with you because you're doubling down on it. And so I want to get a little more information on you. Can you give more of a description on what sort of buildings are you looking for with this creative office space, and what sorts of tenants are occupying this space?
Good. Yeah, yeah. And let me make a comment back when you said you were just
Mm-hmm.
talking in the very beginning about your mindset about the office sector, just watching, not taking too much risk.
Mm-hmm.
That's dead on. Any guys, right? Like we're not buying anything right now. We
Mm-hmm.
are observing. We think it's going to take a lot of time to play out. It's like catching a falling knife. People buying it right now who perceive they have a discount, maybe it works out for them, maybe it doesn't. But right now, I think the prudent buyers are just watching and you're exploring, you're getting deep into it, but you're scrutinizing the heck out of everything. So it's really, really smart. So that's the way you want to think that, right? Be very, skeptical in pulling that stuff apart. So creative single story office, we liked it for a few reasons. Before the COVID, we liked it because it's a space that we thought was going to get neglected. And we felt it's also more efficient than traditional mid-rise office because you have the core factor. And we also felt that there's a tenant class that wanted to control their space, and have to go and, worry about just not controlling for safety reasons, whatever. And we thought we could do some unique stuff because, a lot of the, old warehouses, tobacco warehouses here, North Carolina and, across, there's all different kinds of different, they're really cool the way they did it. Well, we said, hey, listen, let's take these things and let's paint them and let's put big letters on them. And, it wasn't that costly. So the rub is the barrier of entry wasn't really high. So someone else could do it. But their campuses, you look for anywhere, 150 to 400,000 square feet. You usually have pretty good parking there and you could reclaim some of the land to do some unique outdoor space. Like I said, dropping in, some kind of, whether it's a wine bar or, the brewery. Some of these have some retail classifications. You're sliding to a little bit of a mixed use. You can do birds throughout. People can take their scooters around the parking lot. The community space could be unique. You have a band come in and play. We just like that. That was before COVID. And we found that, it was kind of like anything single story. So just imagine, single story office is one thing. And that's just kind of your traditional red brick. And it just looks kind of like, your grandfather or father's building. So, you liven it up. You got to landscape it really well, but you got to offer some amenities. And then, also, maybe car dealerships that are going sideways, you could funk out a bit. An old retail center, you could do something unique to a mall maybe in there. Mall's a little bit trickier because you have some, it's 2-story flex space. We picked up something in Atlanta. It was an old Coca-Cola bottling company and converted it over. It's 450,000 square feet. That's when we have a brewery and some unique stuff going on. It's doing really well. In fact, we have a mid-rise literally as the crow flies like a mile away. And it's a fascinating story, case study in a single story creative office in this property. The mid-rise was bought 2 years before and had substantially higher rents. It was considered more classier, and ours was down here, lower, the single story, and it's literally flipped. And this one, we're probably giving the property back to the lender. The demand is very low, and we've got great demand over here. Now, a little bit of rub, Jonathan, is your quality of tenants initially was not super great. You get a lot of mom and pops in there. But now that's changed a bit. We're seeing the quality go up a notch because you got tenants going, oh, we got to get something unique for our employees and something funky or different. We can't go back to the traditional office. So that's where we feel we can benefit from it. We'd love to grow it to, 8 to 10 million square feet throughout the Southeast. So 2 million today. But what's tricky now is we think there's going to be some really good buying opportunities. So be careful how you grow, right? So if we can find some distress in there, or some broken deals or broken partnerships we want to go land. Like you're a value add guy, opportunistic. That's the way we're built. That's in our crosshairs.
So, what is it about the single story that makes it attractive? I mean, you funkify it and you make it trendy and attractive. Could you have done that to your mid-rise that might not make it? Or like what is it about the single story concept that makes it attractive?
So it's actually an interesting point. It's not a huge distinction between, mid-rise is just not as efficient and you're in a building and you have the single story attractiveness. Tenants want to like to, you find a tenant base that is more autonomous, like to control their space. So that's a check the box there. Your parking typically is literally right in front of your space. So you're not parking, although it's probably good for exercise if you are parking away, but you're not parking in a parking deck and walking across the parking lot and then getting in an elevator to your things. So you have direct access, which is good. And the coolness factor is literally just painting it and doing something unique to the landscaping that you have just more exterior space. So there's an attractiveness. Now, I'm not saying you can't do it to a mid-rise because we've done it to some mid-rise. It's just got a different feel. And you got a lobby area, so you can make a lobby area kind of unique and different. But you have to have enough, it depends on the campus. Single story allows you to do more of a campus feel. You can drop in, like we call the hub space or pocket parks, or back to any amenities. Food truck access is better. It's just the whole ethos just feels better. So it's not like, and I don't want to overstate like, oh my gosh, this is the Gresson, it's a panacea to correct an office, right? But it's not. It's just an area that is just unique and different and feels different than the traditional mid-rise. And mid-rise has a exterior that you can't do a lot with when it goes 3, 4, 5 stories up. You may be able to paint it, but mid-rise, you can do some stuff kind of unique and take it off and put, some extensions off it. Our architect had these fins they put on them. You could just do a lot of some more intriguing architectural features.
And you talked earlier about the importance of location. Are these single story offices, do they have that high walkability score? Are they in trendy areas or does it not matter as much?
Well, you'd like to have them in more trendy areas. Those are difficult at times. So you almost got to create your own feel. That's why having on-site amenities, an important part of it, food service or after hours stuff you can do. So you're almost like, you're creating back to, this environment that people find attractive in a culture that, if you're going, people are throwing around, you need experiential, you need experiential. I don't disagree with that. It's how you do it. I just think it lends more options in a single story canvas than it does like a mid-rise. And mid-rise just it's been a little more tricky or to maneuver. Plus, when you kind of brand it, you want to keep it kind of standard, stuff like that. So that has been helpful too. But just so we're clear, it's unless you're in kind of an industrial district that's now converting over, like you see it in Atlanta, you see in parts of a little less in Dallas, but you see it like in South End and Charlotte. Unless you have those bones in place and other all kinds of cool stuff popping up around you, and then some density, residential density, that helps it as well.
I think it also kind of goes back to our earlier conversation about culture. And while you don't directly impact your tenant's culture, you're sort of, with a space like this, you're setting up an environment that will, invite a company with a more contemporary culture. And so, a company that wants to come into a space like this, I would guess that culture is important to them versus the company that is whatever set on staying in a mid-rise or set on doing a work from home model. And so while you don't have that direct access to culture, you can set up the environment around which your tenants are going to work, which could invite a certain kind of culture. Tell me about the tenants and the amount of space, because we talked a little bit earlier about co-working space, and when I think of co-working, I think of leasing out individual offices. I would think if you've got 150,000 square feet, it's going to be a lot of tenants if you're leasing out individual offices. And so, what's kind of the typical footprint that you are leasing space to? You talked about mom and pops. You might be transitioning to larger tenants, more credit tenants. How big of a space are you leasing out?
So it's interesting. You could have tenants as small as, it depends on how the bay depths are really important, right? So that's the design of the building. We have tenants low as 2,500 square feet, 2 to 3 or 4,000 square feet. We now get tenants in the 30, 40,000 square feet. That all plays into it. We do like the co-working concept. We had WeWork in a couple of our buildings. There's some groups called Expansive. I think Regis has done a nice job. I think my belief system is you're going to have a bigger percentage of co-working space. It's going to be done differently, and it's going to be still back to the menu, and it's going to tie into a bigger play. So there's a space for that. So even this single-story office, you can do these co-working models within that. So, and we would be an advocate for a percent of co-working space in our on our campuses. Now, as landlords, we may want to start doing our own self-performing there or go third party. So I think that's part of the whole office ethos too. So back to the sizes, Jonathan, you can do the smaller side and some bigger ones. So there's a lot of flexibility in there, which is helpful. And to make sure you feel you have smaller tenants and you want to grow them into the space, because we've seen a lot of growth on our campuses too. At times, right now, it's still tricky for tenants to decide if they want to grow or not. But we've seen a mix between the smaller tenants and the big tenants.
And I thought I heard you earlier mention bays. Are these properties strictly office, or is it more of a flex office warehouse style property?
Depends. It
Okay.
depends. We've taken some flex space and we've popped out the roll up doors in the back and make the big glass, open them up. You can pop out some brick and make more glass line. Glass sells, right? And then what you can do is stripe off the back. Some of these flex have less parking, so you can pick up parking in the back. And once in a while you'll pick up a tenant who likes the flexi roll up doors. And I think it's a lot more acceptable because tennis to me also are more gritty today. They don't have to be so traditional. We're all going in jeans. We're a lot more casual, whether you like it or not. It's just the way it is. So I think someone's not going to be so worked up. A financial institution could be next to a company that's electronic company doing stuff out of the back drawer, and it's not that big a deal. They're rolling up doors, so they get some deliveries. I think that is now broken. Those walls are broken down, so I think it allows you to attract a number of different type of tenants in that environment, which is good. You just got to make sure you get the right guys who can stick around.
Well, I'd love to tour one of your properties sometime, because it sounds super interesting and just really unique. I want to transition into my last couple questions here. You've alluded before in the conversation to having to give back some properties. Sounds like you've had to have some difficult conversations with lenders over the last couple years. So I won't ask you, I won't pry into those specific situations. But what I do want to ask is, do you have any suggestions for investors maybe facing some of those difficult conversations with lenders, either with a property they do have that's not performing and the lender is having some serious questions, or maybe there's a property that an investor seriously believes in and they want to purchase, but the lenders are hesitant to lend on some of these deals? What suggestions do you have for investors talking with lenders right now?
Sure, happy to get into. It's an important topic, as you know. Um, to me, the communication, the quality and frequency of communication with your partners, stakeholders, including lenders and investors, are really, really important. And having frank conversations about what the data suggests, and knowing that no one has a crystal ball, and knowing that people have to have shared pain. We all have to work together on it. There's in times like this, it's not about winners or losers. Now, people may want to play that card, and that usually doesn't end well for a lot of folks, especially in this environment with structurally changing. And this has been a violent jolt, especially with interest rates climbing. So, our strategy has been go to the lenders early, and then be very frank on what we believe we need, and don't hesitate to be blunt and finding solutions around it. What you're trying to do is find people to participate on both sides. We're an investor in all our deals. We have partners, we have lenders. If we're going to bring money, everybody brings money to the table. There's some investors who say, I'm risk off, I get it. And lenders, the challenge is when everybody says they're risk off, we're all sitting there looking at each other, staring at each other, going, all right, what next, right? Interest rates are a big part of it. If you can get, that's why this accommodation, this guidance from, as I mentioned earlier, about FDIC and OCC and the Fed is important. That maybe you can find accrue some interest rates. Forbearance is important. To me, it's just trying to navigate. And you may be kicking the can and wake up in the same spot a year or two from now. So to me, I've always been, put it out on the table, let people understand the risk, and don't make the stuff that's very uncomfortable even more uncomfortable. You just put it out there and start negotiating. I think they're going to be a ton of distress. There'll be lenders who they're selling buildings right now, short selling. We're in negotiations with those right now. People trying to find solutions are really, really important. Plus, you're trying to find different options. I mean, one thing, Jonathan, we've got buildings right now in our portfolio that we're trying to do a large national bank, and we're looking at repurposing it to mixed use. It's a tower. So one of our strategies is to go put SDRs in 6 floors, so residential top floor, like a whiskey, cigar bar, do like co-working space on 4 floors, really cool, funky office, and then do longer term leases on the bottom floor, on the bottom bank. And then we're going to recruit about 2 acres in the parking lot. So we're going to do this kind of box yard, funky retail. So bands playing, breweries, wineries, pop-up retail, restaurants, some probably boutique retail. Anyway, that comes alive. It's an office tower that has an office building. We say it's dead, but it's a mixed use. We think there's great opportunity. So working with lenders on that hasn't been proved out, but we got 90 buildings we're tracking in the Southeast with high walk scores, deteriorating rent rolls, distressed owners that we think we can reposition as mixed use that are right now office. We don't see them as office going forward. And we're scraping build. We got a building right now we're looking to scrape down in Atlanta to DR Horton on doing some resi on that. So there's all these options in there. Maybe the lenders will work with you, maybe they won't work with you. I just think, to me, is, people throw transparency around. I don't know what that really means until someone tells me exactly what it means by it. But to me, as you put it out, I always suggest you overextend when you're uncomfortable, put more on the table and just put it out there and say, we got a problem, let's work together. And let's be in the solution business together. And a lot of lenders don't like, I always tell lenders, you're not going to like probably the 6 things I'm about to tell you, but the 3 things after it, I think we can get around it, but you need to hear it. Because there's a corner of what I call denial that I'm pulling lenders out, because lenders are like the last one to want to deal with it. We're on the front line. Now, maybe we could be too pessimistic because we're fighting so hard. But to me, you just be aggressive there and then talk through it, and hopefully. And there could be, I may increase the most net worth of my career during the great financial crisis with my investors. We'd go and try to restructure deals. I had lenders come back to me and say, listen, we really appreciate you trying to work with us. We know we're trying to work together. We want to offer books. Are you interested in buying the note at a discount? So we bought 7, 8 notes at a major discount, owned the properties later. They just wanted to get off their books. We're usually operators are the best, going to pay the most for the property and taking the market. So savvy markets are smart to go to the operator and say, hey, you want to buy the note at a discount? We'll write this off. We're moving on. And if they trust you and you're forthcoming to begin with, you usually have a shot at that. But you got to work through it. You always try to find a solution through it first, and then keep working hard there. And if it doesn't work out, then there's option C, D, E, F. You can pull it off.
Anthony, you're involved in a ton of different asset classes and projects and probably some passion projects in there, a lot of which we're not going to have time to get to. We've talked about office. I know you own some industrial. I know you're getting into short-term rentals. You own a golf course. So a lot of conventional advice is to niche down, stay in your lane, learn one asset class, and don't veer from that asset class. If I had to describe your investing, it's nimble. You're opportunistic. You kind of take what's given to you. So do you have any advice or suggestions for people when they hear niche down, stay in your lane? Do you think that's good advice, or when is it right to veer from your lane and try different asset classes?
So it's interesting. I was listening to what you're saying intently, Jonathan. It's kind of ironic because we were very agnostic before we focused on one niche sector. We just happened to focus on the office sector. So this is interesting. So we did self-storage, very opportunistic value add. This is back in 2008, 9, 10, all the way up to about 2013, 14 until we shifted office. But before that, we were doing self-storage, industrial, multifamily, and also some retail and office. I got my roots in office as a broker. So what's interesting is we couldn't attract the institutional capital as well. So we shifted to office. I'm like, well, that's my roots. I'll start there. I laugh, I smile. I'm like, all right, it's only great. Niching's interesting until you pick the wrong niche, right? So didn't know that office is going to play out, which could open up some opportunities. So and this is my recommendation. It is good to be an expert at something. Now the question is where it's, to me, if you're going to go build silos and expertise in other areas, and you have the aptitude and you're capable in leadership and management to find the right people who are experts there, and then you can lead them well, and there's accountability and there's deliverables and there's a track record, you can build up these silos and you can diversify. It's not that it's just, listen, most entrepreneurs at the end of the day, we're all control freaks, and we all want to, the trust score is low, so we want to do a lot of this stuff ourselves. So I always recommend people to keep pushing. There's a great book called E-Myth. That's the technician, the operator, and then the emperor. Just, somebody who goes from one example you use, like one, like a car repair shop to like 7 car repair shops to growing it to 50, that's hard to someone to scale. So my advice is always, if you are going to scale, look at yourself and think, are you a leader of men or women that can do great things and you can find the expertise and the capital? That's kind of the way we've kind of built my company around that. Although I do like getting in the trenches, and my team at times has got to pull things away from me, going 80 or too much in the details. So I get that too. It's part of my control side and my trust score. So I would say that those are great opportunities if you can build that. And now we're shifting because office is getting decimated right now. It's going to destroy. So about 2 or 3 years ago, I said, we got to shift. I thought it was bad when it hit because it just didn't feel right when we kept saying we're going back to office. So these behaviors are great. So that's what we did, going into small towns of North Carolina, Blowing Rock, Elkin, North Carolina, Southern Pines, down the coast, buying commercial properties or building these Airbnbs that we actually think we can piggyback off the hybrid Friday and Monday with our office portfolio. Hey, you lease with us, you can go to Blowing Rock. We got a place up there, take your family, we're in a community, you can go do tours, you can go kayaking, go hiking. So we actually think that's back to the collision, right? So we've got about 9 locations in North Carolina. We want to grow it to 1,000 units. It's called Carolina Experience. We're excited about that. And then the golf course we bought was just me looking at a bank building at, let's see, was it 10X? You probably looked at 10X auction site. And I looked at this bank building in downtown Elkin. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. If we buy this, we can convert to probably 14, 15 units. Built in the late 1800s. Great story. Right below it was a golf course for sale. I'm like, oh, interesting. So like a real estate guy, I went down there and I didn't fall in love with it. I thought it was really intriguing on Eastern North Carolina, 30 feet above sea level. Guy pumped about $45 million in it. Their auction on it had a really good story. So we picked it up about $4.5 million and we're repositioning it. I think golf is making a resurgence. So Edenton is a small town across the Albemarle Sound. So there's really unique stuff going on where I see all these sectors in real estate. But Jonathan, you're in an interesting space right now. You're trying all these things. Anybody who gets a chance to try different sectors, highly encourage it until you want to specialize. But it's always nice to keep things, kind of to mitigate your risk, to have other options along the way. And that's what we're trying to do right now as we build this bridge.
Man, Anthony, I love hearing your stories. I mean, you could fill books with your stories and your experience and your expertise. This has been awesome. I've got one more question for you. Imagine yourself 10 years from now. Looking back on this time period from 2020 to 2023, what do you think your most important lesson or lessons will be looking back on this time?
Oh, that's a powerful question because I've done a lot of soul searching. I think anytime you go through crisis, this is a pretty major I've been in real estate for a long time in our sector, and I've got my peers, we all feel the same. Like, we've never seen this before, this kind of downturn. So I think it's good to be reflective. So I think, humility, pride is such a tricky thing to me. Type A personalities usually get themselves in trouble because they have such strong, their pride, they get dogmatic. I think it's really had me a chance to open up and think about my leadership style, how I'm built, my false limiting beliefs, what's come forward on that, how I can be a better server of other people, looking at my ego, certainly my Christian belief, the Holy Spirit. It's always interesting, all this stuff coming together on moments like this, and then the people you care about and love in the trenches. Because I've always felt like, being a team guy, the greatest thing is having purpose, and real estate is a great vehicle that allows you to hit a lot of your press spots, and you get to have fierce conversations and lean in people, and it gets messy, but there's great opportunity to do some extraordinary things. And let's be frank, you can create a lifestyle for yourself. It's very interesting, but that can be a trap too, because people go, oh, I get the lifestyle, I want to do all this stuff, that leisure. I'm like, at the end of the day, it's about serving others, about people you doing it with, you love and care about, and you have something at risk. We love having something at risk, because when you have that upside and you're fighting for it and you're scrapping for it, you're coming alive. You're living every day. It's like Jim Valvano's speech. You just listen to that one about the areas of growing in life. I mean, just experiencing, a sense of purpose, laughing and crying. So anyway, I really feel like this has been a great gift. It's been very challenging and very difficult. I'm a father. I got children. Now they're older. I got employees I care about deeply, and we've had to let people off, but we're around the troops. I'm trying to see, we have this thing called enterprise and warrior mindset. This is one of the greatest opportunities, I believe, in my lifetime, to create wealth in real estate, but also me as an individual, as a person, through my spiritual growth, my emotional growth, my intellectual growth, all comes into play. So I'm just grateful. I feel more grateful today, even though I'm getting the crap beaten out of me, but that's just the way it is, and it's nice to have people around you trust, and do it with the men and women in your life that you really are inspired by, but also get a chance to go to war with and battle with. So anyway, I hope I wake up 10, 15 years and people are doing extraordinary stuff. There's probably another battle on the front. We're always doing life. That's life, right? So it's always messy. So you're not going to have it, you just, to me, try to get through it the other side the best way you can. And there'll be some losses in there. Being a win-loss guy, hopefully you take a lot from your wins and losses and keep going, moving forward with some great people.
Well, we're going to leave it there. There was some great wisdom in there. Something I'm going to have to go back and listen to. Anthony, I sincerely appreciate your time today. If listeners want to connect with you or learn more about Dilweg, where would you like to send listeners?
So just adilweg at dilweg.com is my email address. If something comes across, I've got a great team. I can always steer you off to one of my teammates. We do raise capital. We're obviously in the office sector, so we keep it pretty wide open. We're looking for opportunities. So obviously, we're like a lot of people in our space, continue to try to grow, but also try to be around great people. So, and Jonathan, thank you. Great job. I love your podcast. I did listen to it. All that information I got was one of the podcasts you did as a guest. So love your story. Love your heading. Sounds like great upside for you. And hopefully you can get some really good people around you and get a chance to grow them and do some great things. I look forward to catching up with you some other time. So
I'd love to do this again. Anthony, thank you so much for your time and your generosity and sharing your expertise today. Listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, feel free to reach out to either one of us. We love talking about commercial real estate. We'd love to talk with you. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you. Until next time, take care.
Thank you.